Welcome back to the Flow Show. I'm Joanna Turner, intuitive business mentor, and I'm so excited to bring my second interview in this new podcast to you today with my amazing friend Ebonie Allard. I invited Ebonie on. She kept popping into my mind, and she's one of the people that I met in a really beautiful flow story. And I was in one of my most magical moments in Glastonbury, in the middle of a flow story myself when I met Ebonie. So I thought she would be the perfect person to bring on and get her unique perspective on flow and also the work she does. We talk about human design and how figuring out your human design can help you get more into flow. Ebonie is an auDHD modern mystic, author, artist, and Self Actualisation Facilitator. She is a Nervous System Accredited, award-winning master coach focused on using somatic awareness and human design to help curious, complex, creative, and often neurodiverse misfits drop the projections and perceptions of who they think they should be in order to survive and instead thrive, and by being empowered, embodied, and fully expressed. I really enjoyed this conversation with Ebonie. We talked about adult onset or adult figured out ADHD, which she's gone through recently, and I actually feel like maybe I have a bit of that going on. So anyway, it's a really interesting episode. I hope you enjoy it, and let me know your thoughts. Thanks. Hey, welcome back to the Flow Show. I am so excited to be here with my friend Ebonie, and we are going to be talking all things flow and weaving in some really interesting stuff about human design as well. So I'm really looking forward to this because I'm curious, so hopefully you will be too. Ebonie, I know you're in sunny Spain. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, your journey? How did you end up in Spain in the first place?
Jumping straight into the flow story, huh?
No,
okay, so
your background first. How did we get here? Where did it all start?
How do we get here? No big story. I'm going to try and keep it brief as I can.
That's okay.
So I guess somebody who's always gone with the flow, right? In terms of following my intuition, being really open to outside influences showing me the way, because I don't know that there is a right way and a wrong way to live and to be, or maybe I've just never agreed with authority figures telling me that there is a right way and a wrong way to be. So much of my life has been led by responding and going with the flow. So I have been self-employed my whole life, worked in the film industry. I am a manifesting generator in human design. And so I say that because I have followed and been all sorts of things. In my 20s, I was a professional temp, and that's such a manifesting generator thing to do, right? Like I loved being in all these different environments and following people and jobs and careers until they weren't interesting to me anymore, and then going somewhere else and taking this range and diversity of skill sets and people and bringing that into the next place. So that's kind of always been my way. I've been coaching and facilitating self-actualization and helping people come back to the truth of who they are and let go of the perceptions and projections of who they think they have to be or should be in order to succeed and be more wild and more true and more you for 9.5, 10 years full time. And that's really what I do. I tell stories, I communicate, and I remind people that life gets to be an adventure and that it's a joy and a privilege, and that you get to make your own rules or change the rules in order to feel more successful now. And I am in Spain most of the time, not always. I live predominantly I'm in the UK in terms of business and in terms of money and finances and all of those things, but I spend a lot of time in Spain for the light and the sunshine. Wow. And I ended up here in March 2020. I actually got the last flight into Spain, having stuff all got driven out the week before, and that started the October before with an internal, nudge, what I call that kind of soul voice that kind of came in and was like, you need to leave now, you need to take all your stuff, you need to be in this space, you need to be on this land, and you need to do it by the end of February. And I was like, okay, I'm trying. And then everything happened. That happened, and there's been a lot of flow since. But that voice and that knowing and that pull and that sense of right now is something that I have very much obeyed in my life and not always known why. And this is one of those beautiful examples of like, oh yeah, okay, cool. That was why, if you like, because it was the exact place I needed to be in order to have the pandemic lockdown experience that I needed for my own soul growth, I suppose.
Spain was really locked down, wasn't it? You guys had quite an intense experience of it, more so than, say, I did when I was in Australia. Why do you think you need
potentially? I mean, I don't think that's like potentially in terms of, yes, the governments might have said those things, right? But I was in the countryside, in a massive house, able to walk every day, swimming pool in my garden, right? Like, so that nudge for me was very much, and didn't speak the language, wasn't able to understand the news, wasn't like fed it every day, like everything that I needed was provided for me. I was out of a city. I was out of a system, like all of those things. No one was telling me what to do because I was, in a mountain, in the countryside, up a hill. And so, what I mean by that is it was a flow experience of, this is where you need to be for this experience. Yeah.
I love that. I want to go back for a second, if it's okay, ask you, why do you think, so I identify as well as struggling with authority figures. Where do you think that came from for you? And did you have any challenges directly in your life from early on from trying to follow your own path or following the nudges?
Where do I think it came from? I think it's innate in who I am, with the human design knowledge that I have now. It's my conscious earth, gate 60. Okay. And that's to do with acceptance and, I have a lot of stuff around the rules that make sense or don't make sense. That's one lens, one frame that we could look at. The other is, last year at the grand old age of 42, I got diagnosed with both ADHD and autism. And I think that those two together, the push-pull of that, I like to talk about my ADHD in terms of circular thinking, like thinking in circles, and every thought has thoughts from it. And my autism, if you like, thinks in grids, and everything is like makes sense and has a direction and is a rule or is a particular way. And so this way of thinking around the rules or not the rules, or how things should be and what right or wrong is, and a correct way or an incorrect way, like all of that has very much been part of my thinking, my makeup, my journey. Not that I believe there is a right way and a wrong way, but it is part of my, like, what I'm here to study, learn and experience. And I was born to parents who are very, very private, so I often don't talk about them and their lives and their experience. They don't want me to, but they were very young, very ahead of their time, very much into esoteric teachings and philosophy and, the work of Osho and doing their own thing. My dad dropped out of Oxford at 17 and went and became a shepherd. My mum was in India. Like, they had done all of this stuff. And so that's always been my life. And they came from families who wanted them to follow particular paths, and they didn't. And, they were 21 and 24 when they had me, and I'm the oldest, and I was born 12 weeks premature in France. They were living in a house that had no water, no electricity, no roof at the time of my birth. And so the context of the whole thing, it's like I've just never been one for the rules or doing things in a mainstream way, I suppose.
I love that. And I love how you chose some wonderful parents who had sort of broken some of those dynamics, I suppose, or stories before you even arrived. So it's allowed you bigger, which is
for sure. They had no idea, but yeah.
Yeah, like I love that. That's amazing. And how, and yeah, and I was asking. So I love your parents are obviously open-minded, but do you think you've hit up against any other sort of walls or challenges with other maybe types of authority, or maybe when you were at school and trying to weave your own path or go your own way?
I think the best answer to that is part of what led to the diagnosis of autism, right? I have been called difficult my whole life. And for me, I'm not difficult at all. Right? Like, I'm a very simple being, and I'm not intentionally being difficult, right? Yeah. And you've known me and my brand a long time, and so my brand and my story, my book is Misfit to Maven, and people go, "Oh, you're a rebel," and I'm like, no, I'm one of the most compliant people you'll ever meet. And as a misfit, as the difference between a rebel and a misfit is like, I am just different. A rebel is fighting against something, is saying, I see the rules and I know I want to do it differently. Whereas a misfit's like, I don't even see the rules. What are you talking about? Like, tell me what they are and then I will comply, right? Yeah. So for me, it's like, I guess from the outside, yes, I have come up against authority my whole life, but it's never felt that way. I'm really conflict adverse, right? So if something happens and I recognize that I'm coming up against authority, I'm like, oh, cool. What do you need me to do? That said, I've never understood exchanging time for money. And so even from my very first job, where they were like, come in, do this. And I was like, we could do it quicker, or we could do it more efficient, or if you did it this way or whatever. And when you've got a 14-year-old telling you how to do your job better, I imagine that that's quite an ego kick. And so, yes, I had people who didn't love having me around. And I've got this I emanate such love and good nature. And I just, my dad always said, you're such a blagger. And it's not on purpose. I've just got this ability to see what people actually need or want. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't end in fightiness. It's much more this kind of flow through situations for me. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but that is my experience.
Absolutely. And I would say I'd never go looking for it either. Never intentionally. I just sometimes attract the problem, but I'm also operating from my inner truth compass of what I think is right. And I would never go against that, I suppose. So anyway, yeah, I understand that. And it's, I'm always a little,
and here's this fundamental difference. Manigen, respond and inform. Projector, wait to be invited, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the thing is, if you're a projector and you're not following that strategy and you are giving your truth and you are sharing your opinion where it is not invited and it isn't wanted, you're going to come up against bitterness, and that flow ends right there, right? And it is that pull wall. And so for me, the experience of being out of flow is going to be frustration, whereas for you, it's going to be bitterness. And that, I think, is a fundamental difference in that piece of no, you're not looking for trouble, but your truth isn't always going to land. Whereas the manifester in me, and I am a manifesting generator rather than a manifesting generator, and I can explain what that means for some people, but the part of my strategy is in form. And so when I'm saying like, it's like this or it's like that, that is energetically correct for me rather than being difficult or out of alignment. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I wish somebody, like I found out with this invitation thing good few years ago now, probably 2017, 18. And it takes a lot of practice to keep my mouth shut because I'm full of good ideas and they're always well intentioned, but they really don't often land. Well, they just don't land unless I have been specifically invited for my opinion. And yes, that's all. It's a huge learning for me, and unwinding all of that. But I think we'll come back to the human design in a moment, because I'm quite curious about the diagnosis with obviously autism and ADHD are two pretty major diagnoses. What were some of the, I suppose, symptoms or signs that you noticed at the ripe old similar age of me? I think we're the same age. I'm just about to turn 43. What were the signs and symptoms that you noticed that led you to go seeking the diagnosis? And then how has knowing that changed your life?
Okay, so there were no signs or symptoms that led me to seek diagnosis. What happened for me, I don't need a diagnosis. And it's really interesting when people go, they're quite big diagnoses. No, they're not. But for me, it's no biggie. For a lot of people, like, I'm sure it is. For me, it's not a big deal. It just is a frame, right? Like a way of looking at and understanding and giving a name to a particular way of behavior. I know myself really well. I understand all of those things. I have found a way of living that really works for me. And many, many other people who operate in a similar way. And what started to happen a couple of years ago, particularly actually when the world stopped in the way that it did and people could no longer numb or escape who they were, where they were really meeting themselves, and also had to start home educating their kids, what they found is that that their children were being diagnosed. So a lot of my clients were suddenly in this space where they were like going, oh, wow, my child's really, like, I'm teaching them at home and my child's really struggling with this, or I'm spending a load more time with my children and these are the things that I'm noticing.
Wow.
And so their children started getting diagnoses, and what happens as you go through a process of deciding whether or not to get an official diagnosis for your kid, or you go down that lens of understanding them, is you suddenly see that, oh, look, it's inherited, and this is, a genetic thing, and actually if they do, then maybe I do. And so then loads of them started getting diagnoses, and what that meant, and I was supporting them and helping them and really learning about this stuff. And I have a deep interest in neuroscience and embodiment, and so I was really helping them understand, like, actually what's happening in the body, in their multiple brains. Never occurred to me, not once, that I might be also. And then I was writing some copy or creating something specifically for neurodiverse folk, and someone who is like an expert in that area said to me something along the lines of, you can't say that because you're not. And those weren't her exact words, and she didn't mean anything by it, but it was enough for something inside me to go, I want that qualification. And so to me, my diagnosis is a qualification that I sought out, right? It was a level of credibility, I suppose, that I was like, yeah, I'm going to go and get my diagnosis so that I've got this credibility marker, so that I can say, yes, I've been through the process, I understand it, I've, all of these things. And how has it impacted my life? Having a mainstream reference for how I operate and see the world has actually given me a key or a looking glass or thread back into mainstream life that I have really not operated in for the last 10 years, and hadn't realized quite how far removed from shoulds and conventional, traditional living and beliefs and mindsets. I hadn't realized quite how far from it I'd come. And yeah, and so having these conversations with doctors and just all of it, and yeah, it's twofold. Like, one, it's given me a way back in and a way of being more relatable, I suppose, than I was. And two, I guess on a very internal level, there has been a piece of identity work and recalibration of like, oh, there was a place where you were let down and where life could have been different, or it has been harder for you, or, all of that kind of stuff, which did involve grief on the inside, but and also when I look at how I live my life and the frame that I live my life within, the philosophies, I suppose, that I live my life within, people say, would you have liked to have had that information earlier? No, it's perfect, right? Like I didn't. It's made me who I am. It's given me the systems, the processes, the lessons, the facilitation, like everything that I have made a living from. It's allowed me to self-actualize in the way that I have. And so, yeah, I wouldn't change any of it. And I see it as a qualification.
Oh, I love that. And in a way, without knowing, you've created these beautiful, successful strategies for yourself that work because your life works and it's great. And then naturally you were attracting these people who were also neurodivergent but had no idea. And I love that crossover that you were able to help them with your experience, and then they were able to help you put a slightly different frame around things. So I do think things happen always for a reason, always at the right time. And yeah, I love that. It's fascinating. Do you, in your research, now this is for me a little of a naive question perhaps, because I've seen a lot of those Instagram reels talking about the signs of ADHD, not necessarily autism, but I would say most of the time when I watch these things, there's one girl and she's got sort of green hair and her husband, and they talk about how she operates in the world and how I don't know if you know who they are. Okay. And I just go, I find myself nodding almost everything she's doing. I'm like, well, of course, yeah, duh, like, of course you do that. And so some of it I'm like, maybe I have, but I don't feel like I need to go down a path of finding that out. But why, do you know why there are so many more people identifying nowadays as neurodivergent or with ADHD? Do you think there are more people, or do you think it's just we're getting better at spotting it, or better at getting diagnosed with this nowadays, or is there a reason for it?
So, still only 3 to 5% of the population.
Right.
What you're seeing is an echo chamber of people like you that you attract energetically, in the same way as all my clients and all the people in my world. Like, everyone's neurodivergent. Of course they are. We attract each other because we're wired for belonging. We're wired to find our tribe. On an electromagnetic level, our neutrinos are attracting each other all of the time and allowing us to find like to like, right? Like if we take it back to really old school law of attraction type teachings, like attracts like. That simple.
Yeah.
Right? The next level of that is that over the last 10 years, the voice of women has become more accepted, has more weight to it. There's more, we have money, and so suddenly people are like, oh, they're going to buy stuff, we better do some research for them. Not only that, we're landing in jobs, right, where we're like, no, I'm going to look at how this impacts women. So we've had progressions in, if you think about the amount of what do I want to say, increases in kind of technology around periods over the last 10 years as opposed to the last 60, there's been so many more innovations around around sanitary products, around cups, around period pants, around like all of these different things that could have been done years ago, right? Like years ago, we could have been helping women in countries, that needed something that wasn't disposable years and years ago, but no one cared because they don't matter, because they've got no money, because blah, 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 right? So there's all the politics of that. So why are there more women being diagnosed now? Because there are more women who care. There are more women who are in positions who are like, you know what? I think it might look different in women. I wonder how it impacts them. And so, I've had incredibly difficult periods ever since. One of the reasons I'm talking about this, by the way, is that one of the biggest symptoms is undiagnosed or diagnosed PMDD. So premenstrual dysphoric disorder is where we have this massive spike in hormones, normally after luteal, like after ovulation, before bleed, where we're like almost a different person, or like I was like suicidal for 2 days a month, or like would totally see a completely different person in the mirror. And we don't talk about it because I didn't even know that there was a name for it, didn't even know it was unusual, didn't know anyone else was experiencing it. And it turns out, massive symptom of ADHD in women. And so all of these little things, if no one's done the research, then no one can tell you about it, then you can't identify with it, then you can't get diagnosed. And so, I think it's not that there's loads more people. There's kind of a misgeneration. There's our age group, the Zennials, this kind of, I think of us as a bridge generation anyway, from this kind of, what do I want to say? Like from analog to digital, where we're kind of this really interesting generation. We span 2 generations. And so we were missed in some ways. And I think there's a reason for that. We're really innovative. We're really independent. We are creative thinkers. We think in different ways. And we are now the grown-ups. And so it's time, like those of us who became doctors or became politicians or became policy writers are the ones who are like, we were missed in some way. And so that's why I think we're seeing more.
Yeah, that's good. I sometimes do wonder if my scrolling has almost done something to my brain to sort of trigger some of that. I wonder, sometimes I am less, I suppose, again, knowing almost nothing about all this, except for what I learned while scrolling, is when I have breaks and I hide my phone, I have more ability to concentrate, to focus, to not have my brain going in a million different directions, that kind of thing. And so part of me wonders, am I just imagining it? Is it just because I scrolled too much during lockdown? Is that what it is? And so, like I have that kind of a little bit of conflict within myself about that. But I don't know.
And that makes absolute sense. And, what if we really look at one of the other reasons, why did we get so many more diagnoses during that period? Because the entire world was put into a stressful situation at the same time, an unprecedented level of stress. And what that did for a huge amount of neurodivergent people is stop them from having the capacity to mask any longer. And so they hit a threshold. I can't cope. There is something wrong. And so all the places where they were masking, or where we were masking, were no longer possible. And it is a scientific difference, and it is to do with myelinated proteins. It's to do with how our nervous systems regulate. And on a very simple scientific level, we are all wired to come back into safe and social, which is in our ventrovagal nervous system. And that period of time and the way that we are being led towards living, the amount of information that we have, the lack of earthing, we're not sleeping on the ground anymore, we're in beds, we don't go out into nature, we're not letting go of our stress in the same way, does create a level of build up where in our bodies we're not safe and we're separated from that social connection that also regulates us. So yes, there is a much larger percentage of people who are dysregulated and don't know how to regulate themselves, full stop. And that will be true regardless of your operating system. And it's really, really important for all of us to meditate a bit more and to be out in nature a bit more and to learn how we regulate. The idea is not to be regulated all the time, but to be able to move through states quickly and adapt into and come back to a place of relaxation. Yeah. What's happening for most people is that they don't know how to relax. Their cortisol levels and stress levels and adrenals is so high all of the time, and they don't ever get back into rest and digest. And so regardless of operating system, we're at a time where we really need to learn and teach our kids how to, because there's more information in 15 minutes on your phone than people would have in a year, however many years ago, right? Like there's so much. And so the biggest skill we can learn is how to tune out, to tune into our bodies, our operating systems, and to recognize our needs and go, what is it that I need? Do I need water? Do I need sleep? Do I need rest? Do I need quiet? Do I need nature? And give it to ourselves.
Absolutely. I love that. Lots to ponder on that one. I think, I'm a big, big fan of all of, meditation, grounding. I remember a little flow story, but I was getting, literally the universe was telling me from multiple different directions, ground. And it was becoming ridiculously obvious that I had to look into it. And one, I'm sure you've seen it, but I think there's two really good YouTube documentaries you can get on YouTube about grounding. One might be called Earthing and the other one something else. Anyway, but I remember watching those and thinking, right, I need to sort this out. So I bought a grounding mat, spend more time in nature, all that kind of good stuff. So I think that's a huge problem. We've obviously got so much going on energetically, and if we're not grounding it, then lost opportunity, I think, for a lot of people. Anyway, I want to talk briefly next about how we met, because it was a flow story, and then we'll get into the human design part and how it all sort of weaves together, if that's okay. So long story short, I think I was in Glastonbury. You lived at the time pretty close, 45 minutes away, something like that. And you were having coffee with a friend anyway. And I had posted on Facebook that I was in Glastonbury. And I was having all of these signs and things happening anyway, particularly the day I met you. It was one of the wildest days I've experienced in terms of energy. And I know that happens a lot in Glastonbury. The energy there is incredibly intense anyway. So I'm sure people seem to experience more flow when they're there in that environment. And then it felt like I was walking through feels like the Truman Show / the Matrix / I was having one of these days. I was like, this is getting spooky. I could almost feel the universe sort of unfolding around me as I walked through it. And I don't think I've ever experienced that level of, whoa, what's happening, before or since. It was really wild that day. I had met a girl for coffee in the morning, Katie, and I had been told by another girl that I met in Estonia that I should go meet Katie. And I was like, well, where does Katie live? And she said Glastonbury. And I went, okay, it was on my list anyway, I'll go to Glastonbury. I reached out to Katie, or maybe we were put in touch or something, I can't really remember. And we met for coffee that morning. And that morning she recognized my tattoo and she said, hey, is that, did Hannah create that tattoo? And I was like, Yes. And Hannah is somebody that I had been living in Australia before this, before I was traveling. I had met Hannah through, she actually did some admin work for me through Airtasker or something like that. I had gone back about a year later to her again. I said, hey, can you do some more work for me? And she said, no, my business is taken off. I said, what is your business? And she said, I'm downloading these codes from Source and people are having them tattooed onto their body. And I said, ooh, I think I need one of those. So she created me this tattoo that had taken me about a year to actually put on my body because they have a powerful vibrational energy to them. And I'd had it on a few months before I met you. It was my first ever tattoo. And anyway, so I meet Katie, and so Hannah had been living in Australia. I was living in Australia, and I'm now in Glastonbury, England. So on the other side of the world. And this random girl, Katie, meets me and says, oh, is that from Hannah? And how does Katie in England know the tattoos that Hannah has done? Because it turned out Hannah had been in Glastonbury 2 weeks before, had randomly run into Katie, had some sort of conversation. She recognised the style of the tattoo and then connected the dots and asked me if I knew Hannah. And yes, I did, which I thought was wild. And then that day sort of was unfolding. I went for a psychic reading next, as one does in Glastonbury, because they're on every other corner. That was kind of wild. He told me I needed to get more into sacred geometry and the Vesica Pisces. And it turns out there's a Vesica Pisces, or 2 of them, on my arm. I didn't even know I had them. And then I went into this place and they asked me if I wanted to do a meditation, and I sat on a Vesica Pisces, did this amazing meditation. And then I was coming to meet you for coffee. And I was trying to think back, I think it was Louise George maybe, who I don't even know. I've never met her in person. I don't even know if you know her, but I think she maybe commented under a post I did on Facebook saying, Ebonie's close by. Maybe you remember that bit. But anyway, I ended up meeting you for a coffee, and I'd never met you before. We were not friends on Facebook. We didn't know each other from a bar of soap, apart from trusting the intermediary, who I think was Louise, to put us in touch, which I love. Anyway, I came in, sat down, and like within 2 minutes, you said, hey, is that tattoo by Hannah? And I was like, oh my goodness, this is getting so weird. And of course I said yes. I said, how the heck do you know her? Like, this girl from Australia. And you had met her, I believe, 2 weeks previously as well. And yeah, I think that sort of, we just instantly were like, oh, right, there's something has made our paths cross. We just instantly got on, and then it kind of went from there. So I'd love to know your side of that, or what was going on for you, or how you met Hannah. I don't know, it just blows my mind, and I'm going to get Hannah on to chat about stuff as well, because it just, all these sort of moments of the people and the signs and it was just wild. And I was like, okay, I'm sort of like looking up at this guy, like, I'm listening. You haven't, like, it's when they hit the, I was like, you guys have got my attention today, like, for sure. But yeah, so how did you experience that moment, I suppose?
So interesting, because I didn't realize that it was in that order. So I met Hannah. I'm going to start there. I met Hannah through a post on Facebook. It's not even necessarily that, like, that's not how I met Hannah, right? So the first time I ever saw that tattoo was on Louise George, on a picture that she'd posted. And she said, this is a code and it's from Hannah Wilson, la, 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 right? And I didn't think anything of it. And I think I looked at Hannah's page, but didn't request her, didn't friend her, didn't follow it, just looked at it. And if I'm completely honest, at that point in life, I was like, yeah, whatever. Downloaded.
Oh, me too, sure.
Mm-hmm.
I was like,
yeah. So then I go to sleep and this woman, Hannah, is in my dreams, like a lot. And so I woke up one morning and I sent her a message and I said, listen, I don't know you from a bar of soap. Like, I literally don't know you from anything. Your name has appeared once as reference to a tattoo on my friend's arm, right? And I do know Lou quite well. And weirdly, haven't spoken to her for ages, and 3 people mentioned her yesterday. So, so weird.
I'll get her on.
So I message Hannah and I say, I am driving to Birmingham tomorrow. And I live pretty near Glastonbury, and I dreamt that you need a lift. Please don't think I'm really weird. Do you need a lift to Birmingham? And she said, oh my God, yes.
Wow.
It was like, what?
Wow.
And so I picked Hannah up from Glastonbury and drove her to Birmingham. Right? And then went and spent a weekend with my friend Natalie, who I have all of these sorts of stories with as well. Okay, so that was that piece. And then meanwhile in my world, I travel a lot. And I was going through this pace where I was really experiencing and working with abundance with the universe. And for me, much more now, but it was the beginning of my journey around it then, abundance isn't money. Like, everyone always thinks it's 6-figure, 7-figure. For me, it's resource. It's very much about, I want to go do this, help, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment and in that time, it's, I want to go do this, help. Give me someone who can be the custodian of my very special house, who will look after it, and who will give me some cash to be living there so that I can go and do, like, I can pass it on. And that was the thing for me. So I was in Glastonbury 2 weeks later or whatever, meeting my friend Megan, who also, by the way, hosts a podcast called The Intuition Conversations and is also all about flow and who lives her life in this way.
Oh, I love that.
And I came and
she was lovely, yeah.
I think you met her because I think you were late or she was late or someone was late and you both ended up
having we both
coffee with me.
I can't remember. Yeah.
I can't, but what it did was it means that you got to meet, like, somebody else, like, gave you a reference of me, right? Rather than me just being this complete stranger who was like, and like, simultaneously, I had never met you. I had no way of knowing, and I probably shouldn't have been like, do you want to rent my house?
I think you spotted the tattoo. We made the Hannah connection, and then 2 minutes later you said, would you like to rent my house? And I went, okay. Where is it? That sounds good.
And I was like, I was right on a deadline. I was really like, okay, I can't go away if this doesn't happen, right? Like, this needs to happen this week. Like, where's it coming from? Where is the person who's going to give me like several grand, right? Like, in cash, so that I can go now. Yeah. And then there was the Facebook post and there was the Lou George thing, and then you were like, oh, I'm here. And then we met for coffee, and then I saw the tattoo, and then the Hannah thing clicked. And then I was like, do you want to rent my house? And you were like, yeah, actually, I hate the one I'm in right now. I really need to move. And the last bit of the story for me, the last bit of the story is, so we had a tiny overlap where we were in the house together. So, spoiler, she did rent the house, right? And we had this day where we like came downstairs in like the same kimono and the same hat, and I was just like, so weird. And I think there's a picture on Facebook, and I'd love for us to dig it out, because we did a live, because we were both just like, this is too much. It
was wild, because I remember, I was staying in this awful Airbnb in London, and I'd had some weird stuff coming up around safety, and I'd also just, I think at the same time, purchased my Nix code from Hannah. So she was sort of back in my sphere of reference as well. And I think you just said there was an issue with the lock, and I was in a ground floor flat in not the nicest place. It was an Airbnb, a lovely Airbnb, but not in the best place in London, and the back door didn't lock. And I remember I spent hours and hours on the phone with Airbnb, with different people, trying to figure out, because I was like, I don't want to sleep here if somebody could just walk in the back door. And that sort of unfolded, and I think I was sort of in that energy when I met you, and then you were like, just come, and I was like, fine. And so I think I lost money because I was sort of cancelling my Airbnb in the middle of being there, and you were like, look, just get here. And I was like, okay, I'm coming. And it felt like a very safe, it felt lovely to go to somebody, even though I didn't really know you, but we were just like, okay, we just clicked. And so I turned up, I think, a night or two early before you went away to LA. And I think you were going to meet some of my friends out there or something. You were doing something with work or a course or something. And then meeting people, I was like, oh, you know them too? And it was just one of those bizarre moments. I can't even remember who that was. But yeah, there was lots of things. And we did have that matching kimono. And I was like, did you get this off an Instagram ad too? I think we'd been targeted for the same Instagram ad, which was just hilarious. And yeah, then I got to be in your beautiful house for, I think it was about 6 weeks or something. And that led me on this other journey because I was able to go back to Glastonbury from there. And some other weird crackers things happened when I went back. And then I met this guy who I'd known in Estonia, and we needed to like wrap up some karmic stuff. And that wouldn't have happened. He wasn't supposed to be in that part of England. And neither was I, except we were. But yeah, so that very neatly tied up as well. And then the sort of things just carried on from there. So yeah, that was wild. I didn't realize that Hannah had come to you in your dreams. I always find her work was very, even though I was a bit skeptical at the beginning because I was still in my own spiritual awakening when this was happening. And when I first met her, probably back in like 2016 maybe, when I first met her. So I was still in my own process and sort of awakening and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, but I always found her stuff very powerful, and I was like, there's something here. I just knew it was for real. And she's been on quite a mission, which I don't know exactly what her mission was, and my mission has sort of been a little bit parallel, or my mission in those few weeks, which I might expand on another time, was I was about 2 weeks behind her in all these sacred locations around the UK during this Lionsgate portal. So it was a bizarre time. But I truly believe that there's something going on, and I don't know how you think about what you do, because obviously you have you have a strong energetic blueprint, and I was unconsciously for a very long time doing grid work by taking my own energy to different places, many sacred sites. And I feel like we were supposed to connect for some reason. And then you took whatever my code was, and I took whatever code I needed from you. And off you went to LA and wherever else you went. And then I went wherever. And so I think there's some sort of, and maybe there was some code that you needed to get from Hannah and then pass on to me because we had some weird karmic connection. I don't know. It's hard to sort of, and certainly back then I wasn't as consciously aware of it all now. And looking back, I can see how it all fits together in a sort of big web now. I'd love to know if you've been sort of aware of, I mean, I think you know, but like your conscious awareness of it, or how that developed, and how you, I suppose, articulate your experience of doing that work, the grid work, the bizarre assignments that would get sent on.
It's funny because I have so many actual grid workers in my network, right? Like people who, before it was even known as a term or a thing that people would do, were like very much called to go somewhere and would then go, and they knew they had codes, and they would take totems sometimes and offer things up. And it's really been a part of my experience, you know, like we were saying much earlier, where it's like, I was kind of born into this, right? Like there was no awakening for me. I was, you know, I mean, but a whole other thing, and maybe it isn't, like I was born in Hyères in Provence, in the south of France, on the Magdalene line. And I believe that has something to do with it. And I don't see myself as a grid worker. I see myself as a facilitator for the grid workers. And so what I do, a little bit like what I did with Hannah, was like, I'm a ferryman, I'm a fixer, I'm a bridger. Like, part of my job is to kind of go, oh, okay, you need to get there. Hang on, like I move things around and I provide home and shelter and safety for people who are on mission.
I love that perspective, because I wouldn't have known exactly, how we all. I'm still figuring it out. I have a better understanding, but I think some of it I don't think we could understand in this lifetime. And sometimes I know exactly where I'm supposed to go on the day I'm supposed to do it. Sometimes I don't know why I'm being sent to the place. Sometimes I'm very clear. Sometimes somebody's given me a crystal, and I think, and so I often take a crystal to the place. And so there's a sort of an awareness around that. And looking back, this mad web of like that girl saying you must go and meet Katie in Glastonbury sort of unlocks the next part of the chapter. I could have ignored her and not gone, of course, but I've been doing my utmost to follow those nudges, and for me that's when flow really kicks in. Is when I'm following that guidance, like you said, that voice that was like, get out, be in Spain by the end of February, which is wild. And I was, funnily enough, in LA in February, March of 2020, and I was supposed to be there for another, I think in LA for another 4 weeks, and then I was supposed to go to Costa Rica. I was supposed to hold a retreat. I was supposed to go to a retreat, then have a week off, and then host a retreat. And that was all booked and happening and all the things. And then I had a complete meltdown, which is very unlike me actually, in LA, missing my little dog. And it was just so clear that, and I am somebody, I hate changing plans. If I've said I'll do something, I follow through to the absolute best of my ability. I've never, maybe apart from that one time, changed a flight. If I've booked it, I'm going, and that's that. I very rarely deviate from the plan. Maybe I should more, but that was just the case. And it was so clear that I needed to cancel the retreat or move the date. Was the original plan. We moved it out to June because we thought the world would be back to normal by then. I decided I would forfeit going to the thing in the retreat I'd also paid for to go to before I was going to host my own. So I forfeited that, and then I left 4 weeks early to get back to Australia. And had I not gone back, I might have been stuck in Costa Rica for up to 3 months. So I don't know if you've watched on Netflix The Longest Third Date. Did you watch that? I was like,
it's not. I'm so not into reality TV, but I know the show. I watched the trailer. Let's say,
yeah. So they ended up around that time getting one of the last flights out of the US, and I would have been on a similar flight, either a few days either side, and potentially have been stuck in Costa Rica for up to 3 months. So this deep knowing / breakdown of you need to go home right now was very clear. And there were all sorts of weird and wacky things happening in LA, specifically in the room I was staying in. Weird things were happening. I'm trying not to swear. Very weird, wacky things were happening that were just like, it was almost like, you're not welcome here, get out. Like a random girl I had just met 10 minutes earlier lost the tip of her finger in the window in my room. Like, I needed to go to hospital. Like, that was one, like the wind, and there was this crazy storm and the wind was banging, and she's like, oh, I'll fix it. And I was like, no, it's fine. And in that, like, her trying to fix it anyway, she lost top of her finger. And then the house that I was staying in was this amazing, stunning, beautiful home, sort of dream house vibes. And somehow somebody had broken in to the house and trashed my bedroom. And all my stuff was all over the place in this beautiful dream house place. And I was like, it was just getting weird, when like things just get really weird. And I was like, and then I was like, right, I need to leave. But anyway, so I'm glad I trusted that. But I'm digressing a little bit. So coming back into our experience and how we met, and we touched briefly on human design earlier, and you being a manifesting generator and me a projector. Can you tell us, now some people might be complete noobs to human design, could you very high level explain what human design is, and then how we experience, I think, what was it you said, how the different types experience flow and create more flow by following their human design?
So human design is based on your time, date, and place of birth. So it's the exact moment that you went from being soul or light or energy into matter, into form. And that's coded. And that we are made of neutrinos, we're made of energy. Like neutrinos are like tiny neurons, and we get that information coded from the sun, from the earth, from the planets, right? Like that information lands in those cells, and then we are formed. And so on a DNA, on a molecular level, all of our information, all of like our personality, our operating system, like all of it is in there. So human design is comprised and is a synthesis of 5 different modalities that were already known of, and that were kind of synthesized by a guy in the mid-80s. So it's only been around 35, 40 years. Okay. So we've got astrology, the I Ching, the chakra system, the Kabbalah tree of life, and then quantum physics or quantum mechanics or metaphysics. So it's those are the languages, if you like, that make human design. And within that, then you have 5 types, 4 types, but one is a mixture. So you have generators. Generators are sacral beings. They are the worker bees, or they have life force energy, and they are here to create and to make things, to use that life force energy for all of us, for the greater good and higher good. Then we have manifestors. Manifestors are initiators, they're leaders. They're the old school leaders that used to kind of, when we lived in times that were kind of hierarchical with factory owners or landowners, they would be the ones that had a vision or a mission or a way that something was going to happen, and they would have then lots of generators who delivered that, who did the work for them. Manifestors these days are here, there are far fewer of them, but they're here to usher in the kind of innovative and new ways of seeing. They work in so alignment for them is an urge, is a moment of like they need to speak, they need to share, they have information that is very innovative, and their strategy is to inform. And when they do, and manifestor energy is like a train. It's going from one station to the next, but they need to inform and say the train is going to this place. And then what that means is that everybody else can either get on board or get out of the way. And so they can either support that manifesto and like make stuff and like be there for them, or they can get out of the way so that there's a smooth journey.
Yeah.
We then have projectors. Projectors are the CEOs of the future. They say they have bird's eye view. They're looking out over everything. They can see a much more wide view of everything and everyone. And so in that analogy, you've got the manifestor with the vision. The projector is then able to be an architect, be able to kind of project manage and have their own specialist area or this thing they're really interested in, where they can be like this and this. And the way that the projector's aura works is it can see right into people. It's very penetrative. And it means that they can, if they hear a mission, if they hear something from a manifestor, they can then pick the right generators or the right manifesting generators for that, because they can see into them, see what they're made of. And it's for that reason that projectors need to be invited, because if there isn't a feeling, and it's not like a cordial invitation, it's a sense of being invited. Because if you're not invited to share, to come into someone's energy, it can feel very invasive and really like, imagine it's like someone's reading your mind or reading your energy, or like very deeply entering you. If that isn't with consent, it gets a very strong no, which you've experienced, right? And so projectors' strategy is to be their own lighthouse, to vision what they want to experience in the world, and to send that out. They need to recognize themselves first. They need to see what it is that they want to vision in the world, what they want to project in the world, and be that. When you are projecting who you be into the world, then people are like, oh, that's the projector I want to like guide me and to tell me. So they're the seers and the guides of the world. And then we have manifesting generators and generators. Generators they step, stare, build. They do everything the same. They are here for mastery, and they repeat. And the more they do something, the more skilled they get at it. Manifesting generators blend and mix things together. So they don't do anything the same twice ever. They're like, oh, and then this, and oh, and then this, but they continue to build, but they build in webs. And I'm a manager, by the way. So we kind of build by like bringing different things together. And instead of mastery, we're here to synergize and to like make things more effective and more, and remind everyone that it gets to be exciting and that we get to do things differently, and life is an adventure. So we have these two different types of builders. And then the last type is the reflector. And the reflectors are undefined. They don't have any defined centers. And so they can experience life either as a sponge, which they are not designed for, or as a reflector, reflecting the health, the energy, the vitality, the experience of a space or of a community or of people. They are incredibly insightful oracles, and they really, really need to learn how to cleanse themselves of each place that they've been or each experience that they have. And their strategy is to wait a lunar cycle, is to give themselves time, because over a lunar cycle they experience being all of the different types. And so they get this experience of being everyone and everything, which is why they're so wise, but they need to not rush themselves into making a decision or to taking action. So for them, flow will be like, oh, this environment feels safe or feels good, or, oh, this is delightful. And so their signature is delight. Did I do generators? Generators is satisfaction and like flow and responding. Projectors is peace and success. Manifestors is peace. And so this feeling of success, of like, yes, that is the signature and the response piece for. So it's like you're waiting for an invitation and a feeling of success as a projector.
Yeah. Oh, well, I tell you something. When I first realized I was a projector, I was so disappointed. I was so gutted, because for several reasons. One, projecting on others is not cute, right? In the sense that we maybe know it from therapy. If you're projecting your issues on someone else, that's not ideal behavior. So I didn't like the name for a start, because I felt like that had a negative connotation. And then I was like, but how am I supposed to manifest anything if I'm not a manifester? So that was part of it. And I felt like manifestors were like the properly, and I was trying to be an entrepreneur, and yet I was like, well, how can I do that if I'm not a manifester? And then the generators, who I believe are 70%, have this internal energy and ability. And I was just like jealous of them too. So I was like, they're getting everything done. They actually have the energy to get stuff done. And I found out in my sort of years of trying to figure out how to be a projector, that we can be quite prone to burnout because we don't have a defined sacral, I believe. I'm not a human design person. I've just done lots of research, I'm fascinated by it. So I was like, wow, brilliant. So I'm prone to burnout. I'm not supposed to initiate stuff because I'm supposed to wait for a blooming invite. I was like, how am I supposed to and I'm not supposed to work in this 9-to-5 job as a worker bee because I just burn out, and I experienced that. And I did feel a bit lost, to be honest, at the beginning, because I was like, well, God, what am I supposed to do then? And I feel like a lot of the coaching industry, well, my old corporate industry was set up as if you were a generator, that's the type of job I was doing, I suppose, and maybe was stepping more into a more projector type role towards the end of my career. But that didn't work for me. And then I'm in this entrepreneurial world trying to be a coach and learn all the things. And I felt like I was being taught by manifestors how to do the manifesting. And I remember one coach at one point was like, oh, well, if you're not cold outreaching to 100 people a day, you just don't want it enough. I remember thinking, I can't think of anything worse on the entire planet. I've never cold called or messaged anybody. And I know that if I did that now, well, we did at one point, I did hire a girl to do some podcast outreach. It was awful. It didn't work because it was not the right strategy or energy for me. So it was quite confronting at first, and then I was like, but hang on a second, I just get to decide what I want and then sit about and do what I like to do and be myself. And then invitations come in, and now I was like, oh, excellent. So yeah, it's been a bit of a journey. I suppose that initial rejection, a bit annoyance, and now the more that I lean into it, I can see the ease unfolds, and when it happens, and when I'm more in my projectorness, there is more ease in my life. And it's interesting. I'd love to know what you would say to all that. If I'm on the right track. I don't know if I said anything wrong there, but about human design.
The only thing I would say, and it's really lovely to hear it like from you, is that there's so much disempowering knowledge, and the way that this stuff is being shared, hopefully it's changing. And the way that I share it is very embodied and very empowering. The whole point is we are not all the same. And so for me, like it is the science of differentiation, and it is all about us interbeing. And it's all about flow, right? It's all about us connecting with one another and not all being the same. And so I hear you, and I apologize on behalf of all of the inaccurate information because it makes me really upset, right? Like when people turn things away because they hear something and they're like, and it is old language. It's language of the 80s, right? Like that's when it was, these building blocks, these names were given, and they were given for a reason, and it was, labeled by a guy, and it was of a time, and all of those things. And I think now there are, Karen Curry Parker, her language around each one. So for example, the manifesting generator is a time bender. There are like these different words that people are coming up with that are maybe better. But I think spending time understanding that there are misconceptions and there are disempowering things out there is important. And then really, looking at it from a place of what does this mean for me and my strategy? And it is an experiment. So you've got to come from a place of curiosity of like, well, what happens if I give this a go? And to say to a reflector, oh, you've got to wait a lunar cycle and you don't have any energy in you is inaccurate. Right? It's for the bigger decisions, that you're going to want to wait. You're going to have some things that you just know because you will operate as each type throughout the thing. As a projector, to say that you have no energy and that you can't create Not true. When you're around other people, you're going to be feeding off their energy, which will create channels in you. So there might be like one person or two people or friends in your world that you actually become a generator around because of the electromagnetic field and the way that those connect. So for a lot of people, it's really about how we get to be together, and there is no right or wrong. There is no better or worse. We have to really rid ourselves of that way of thinking and see it instead as a language of wiring, of operating systems. And there is no right or wrong way that a car is built. It just is built, and that's how it works. It's not like, oh, I wish it was built like a bike, but that it wouldn't be a car. It would be a bike, right? Yeah. So for me, it's less about comparing and a right way and a wrong way, and much more like, let's have a look under the hood. Let's see. So I have a program coming that's, or like one of my one-to-one programs that I do is called Full of Yourself. And because of that, it really is like, let's see what you're full of. And like, that came from a Facebook ad many, many years ago. I did a Facebook ad, under somebody else's guidance, like you were talking about. And the trolling on like 3 or 4 different ads, totally unrelated people said, oh my God, this woman's so full of herself. And my response was like, well, who the fuck else should I be full of, lady? Right? Like, I don't understand. And that for me is like what this is about, right? Like, oh, you're so full of yourself. Who else should I be full of? Like, actually, really. And so for me, the study of human design, the study of human design is who are you full of? What are you full of? Let me help you understand yourself better so that you can be in flow, work your own strategy, understand your own blueprint, not get confused by all of these other people who are saying this is how it should be, but understand what your strengths are and where your wisdom gets to. Because all of those places where you are undefined is not a challenge. It's not a failing. It's not a weakness. It's an area for wisdom to develop. And those of us who have less definition and more open, and I work very specifically with those types because they feel like misfits, because they feel like others, because they experience a inconsistency to the world. We're here for wisdom. We're here to be the wise people of the world and to guide and to help because we've had so many experiences. So for me, it's always empowering. And yeah, I could talk about it all day, and today is not that day. But if anyone wants to talk to me about human design, always open.
Oh, I love that. And I really appreciate the way you speak about it, because it does sound so much more empowering, and that's kind of where I've got to with it. Obviously, I started in a way that didn't feel like that, and now I can see it more for the superpower that it is, and it's when I follow it, it makes my life a whole lot easier. But interestingly as well, I was just thinking when I'm just getting this podcast up and running, but it has been in my field for so long. I've had so many like sort of hits and to do this. And I mentioned in a group, I was asking a question about something, but it was a projector group. And this woman, who I don't know who she is, but I think she's an admin of the group, was like, if you haven't had a generator come to you and say, I like what you're doing, let's start a podcast together and I will do all of the back end stuff for you, and you basically just need to show up and speak, then you shouldn't be doing it. And I was like, oh, and I felt, sorry?
Makes me so uncomfortable.
Oh,
it makes me so uncomfortable. So tiring. And the truth is that you get to invite yourself. You get to be the lighthouse, right? Like a projector doing a podcast is such a good idea because you get to invite your voice. You're like, it's my show, I'm going to talk. The difference, and I actually have talked about this on quite a few, I, as a manager, find my solo episodes on my podcast so hard, right? Because I have nothing to respond to. for you, if your own invitation is there, you can talk in a solo, right? It's like it's there, it's easy, because you're like, oh, someone asked me about, yes, I feel like because it's not a cordial invitation, it's a sense of feeling invited. So if the time is now right for you to talk about flow, and it wasn't 5 years ago, there's a sense of being invited to talk about this now. And that is enough, right? Because it's about you projecting and being the lighthouse. If it was, there have to be a certain amount of people listening to this, or it has to be, that kind of thing, that's really different. But if it feels like success to be having a place to say your piece, then it's already in your strategy, already in alignment. Can you see that?
Yeah, and I felt like she'd slimed me. That's the best way I can describe it. Like literally all of her, it was her judgment. It was like she'd shamed me for even considering the audacity to get this going without a written invite from a generator. And I was just like, and then I found myself starting to defend myself. And then I was like, actually, no. And I just turned comments off in the post, because I was like, this is so yucky. I don't want to have to defend myself to somebody who doesn't know really who I am from a bar of soap either. And she didn't know the intricacies of my chart. She didn't know. And I've always thought, as this, as we've talked about following our intuition and our path, sometimes the invite I get is, it sounds like somebody yelling in the room and I'm alone. Like that sometimes is how it works, right? Like you're
authority. What kind of projector are you? Because this is the thing with so many. You're a what?
Emotional 6-2. So I'm a hermit leader.
So you've got your emotional center defined. What else?
Yeah. Oh, I'd have to pull my chart up.
Cool.
Oh, I actually have it here. But I don't even know what they're all called. So I've got
how many have you coloured in?
4.
Which where?
My root, the one on the triangle on the right.
That's center, yeah.
Then I've got what looks like maybe my throat, and the one below it, the diamond below it, the heart, maybe. Is it?
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So this is, your direction because your G center is aligned. You want to talk, and it is, your throat is motivated by your emotions, right? So if you feel something, if there is emotion for you on a particular subject and it's the right direction for you, which is your G center, you will know, right? And then the timing piece is that root. So it's the direction, like your specific direction, because there's one set way for you from your G center. The root is going to tell you the time, the pulse to move. The emotion piece means you've got to wait a little while and move through the wave with that. So it's not high or low. I also have I'm emotionally defined, right? Emotional authority. And of course, like it's that motorized throat that makes you a projector, but you don't have that sacral. Okay. But that doesn't mean you haven't got any energy. You've got emotional energy. When you feel emotional about something, you have the energy to do it, particularly if it's you, right? Which is your G center. So yeah, it's way more complex than just the 5 types. There are, like you said, you've got the 6-2, so you've got these different periods of your life, and you've got to try stuff out, and you've got to fail, and there's all of this different intricacies and levels and layers of human design. And what people try to do is they take on too much information without implementing it, without embodying it. And that's my specialty, is really like dividing it out into chunks and having these reports and these ways of working with people that you can go and play, and you can go and experiment, you can embody it, feel it, and then be ready for more. Because otherwise it's just an overwhelming wall of information, which is not going to do anything for you or your life.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you. And it took me, I've listened to a podcast, funnily enough, of a projector specific podcast, and the girl on it talked about how she was a projector and how she started her podcast and how it felt like a divine sort of inspiration. And I was like, that's where mine came from. So and she'd started hers. And so that's where the flow idea came from. I was out a walk and it came ping into my head, and I was like, oh, where did that come from? And that was how she started hers, and she was a teacher in this. I was like, and it was a little bit like, because I'd started and then that woman had slimed me, it gave me then the permission to actually, yeah, no, you were right in the first place. And I felt I was, but I did get a bit derailed, just trying to get the slime off. And that podcast really helped. And I thank you for that confirmation as well. If somebody is brand new to this, they're like, this sounds interesting, I would love to know where do you recommend people find out their charts? Do you like the Jovian archive, or what's your recommended one?
Mine.
Yours?
Come and get mine.
Hello. Oh, I didn't know you had them. Where? Tell me where. Where do you go?
So you can just go to ebonieallard.com. It is on the front, but there is also a URL just for it, which is ebonieallard.com/human design chart. But I'll send it to you so you can make it easy. But yeah, on my website, free one. It's like a 9-page report for free, valued at like 50 quid, because it's really, really important for me that people have this grounding into their bodies and into how it feels to do that. So that's what I do. And you can go on there, put your information in, it will spit out a chart for you. You must press the button, but there's a video telling you that, and you can download a report that will go through and explain what each piece means, specifically for more clarity, more energy, and more confidence. And so, I highly recommend it. I've had so many good pieces of feedback around it, because there's stuff on where to sleep and all sorts of stuff. I love.
That's another whole thing I want to ask you. We don't need to get into that. I'm like really concerned about being a projector and having to sleep alone. Okay.
You don't have to do anything.
I haven't even got a boyfriend yet, and a projector thing says I have to be alone.
You don't have to do anything, but what you might find if you spend a lot of time with someone is that you become really full of them. And so from time to time, you're going to want to clear that out and be like, I just want a night alone. And that's all it is. All of these things are an experiment. It's not a rule, right?
Do you want to be my boyfriend? We're going to have separate beds from the word go, because my human design says so. That didn't feel good.
And you say that, like, I know so many projectors, instead of feeling the way that you feel about it, are like, oh my God, yes, I can finally say that I just don't sleep unless I'm alone. And, there is no right way.
I have struggled to have a good night's sleep when I share a bed, so it did ring true in that sense. But still, I was like, oh my God, come on, give me a break. But interesting, I've spent most of my life sleeping alone, so I've had plenty of time to figure out.
Well, and what would happen, right, if you, instead of feeling like, oh, this is an awful thing, what if you were like, this is great, I understand how I sleep best, but that doesn't mean you have to do it all the time. Like, we can go so deep, right? Like, I am, in terms of my human design, I'm consecutive eater, which means eating one thing at a time, and not eating hugely complex meals of loads of different tastes layered on each other. And when I first had that, I was like, but I love complex meals with tons of flavors, right? Now, it doesn't mean I can't have them. What it means is, if I do, I won't be able to concentrate or digest in the same way. Now, that is absolutely true. When I am sick, I eat consecutively. I'm like, I want a bowl of cauliflower, or I want a bowl of carrots, or whatever it is. And then I finish, and now I'm like, and now I want this, and now I want this. And that is consecutive eating. And when I do that, it's so that my body can heal, so that I'm able to concentrate, so my brain works quicker and better. When I absolutely do not want to think, the best thing for me to do is eat a roast dinner. What will happen? I can't think. I lie on the sofa and I'm like, I can't think of anything. It's so great. That doesn't mean it's bad. It's just a different thing, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't want to sleep with someone, fab. How great. You're not going to sleep. But if you want to sleep and have a really good quality night, you might want to do it in your own bed.
Mm-hmm. Okay, something to think about. I don't want to write it off before I've even started, Ebonie. That would be tragic. All right, well,
separate beds. I think, I love having the purpose. I'm like, don't talk to me. I'm like, I'm sleeping. And there are, you get to do this in your own way. And it's like, sometimes sleep together, sometimes stop you from having a relationship.
Yes, thank you for that reframe. But it's funny when I start to sort of imagine my dream house in my head, and I'm like, gosh, I'm going to need an extra bedroom just for me occasionally. Like, okay. But yeah, anyway, so that's just how my mind works. Right. So thank you so much. This has been amazing. And is there anything else exciting you have coming up that people should be aware of? Obviously, I'll post where they can find you and your website and get an amazing chart and reading done. What else is going on?
There's always stuff going on. I've just released a rebooted version of my signature program, which is now dopamine heavy and is gamified, and you can win badges and there are side quests and it's so fun. Yeah, this is what happens when you understand your type. You're like, I get to do this? Yes, it's amazing. So many new and fun things coming. My podcast is every other week because I found that after 6 years of podcasting, every week is too much pressure for me, and whenever I want is not enough pressure for me. So I do a bi-weekly, season by season podcast, which I absolutely love. And that has a Patreon part, so I do a whole other episode where we go much deeper into stuff as well. So for £5 a month, you get all sorts of bonuses and things. So come check it out. I'm always on Instagram at Ebonie Alchemy. Slide into my DMs, chat with me. I'm very chatty. And whenever you're listening to this, come and say hi.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we'll chat again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us on this episode. I hope you enjoyed all of Ebonie's wisdom. I will leave all of her details in the show notes. Definitely go and get one of your human design charts from her. It makes such a difference in your life to know which of the designs that you are and then how to apply it to your life, obviously to try and find more flow. And also, as we are a brand new podcast, we really appreciate any subscriptions, reviews, shares, all of that good stuff. It will really help us as we get going, start to improve, and we really appreciate it. So thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next episode.